Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to make a game where you have a character that you can move around by dragging it from side to side. You try to eat snacks and you try to avoid snakes. You can see my dog is trying to get tacos. Every time it eats a taco it gets a point. Every time it runs into a snake it loses a life, and the game speeds up as it goes. So the more points you get, the harder the game gets, and the speed increases until eventually you run out of lives. So I'm going to create a new project and I'll show you I'll walk you through how to make that. Alright, so the first thing you'll need is to set up your designer window. That's going to have, as you saw in the example, the background image and three image sprites on a canvas, as well as a few labels. So I'm going to add that top label just for the label for the game. I'm going to call it label top. And that's just going to say eat snacks, not snakes. Then I will get a canvas. It's usually a good idea to have flexible sizing, but just to keep this simple, I'm actually just going to specify an exact size. In the future, we'll be making apps where you have sizing that's more flexible for different sized screens. But for this one, for this purpose, I'm just going to say 300 pixels by 300 pixels for height and width, just to keep things straightforward. The canvas will need 3 image sprites for the taco, the enemy, and the dog. So I'll call that image sprite taco, image sprite snake, image sprite dog. And I'll need the images for that. And while I'm uploading images, I'm also going to upload the background. So I uploaded the background image, the dog image, the snake, and the taco. I'll set the canvas background to the background picture. I'll set the taco picture to taco.png, and you'll notice the taco is way too large. I'm going to set its height to 30 pixels and width to 30 pixels. Sprite snake, I'll do the same thing. Choose the picture, height 30, and width 30. Dog picture, And height. This time I'll make it a little bit larger. Since it's the main character, I'll make it slightly larger than the other image sprites. And that one will be 50 by 50. And for their sort of initial positions where they start, I'll just move the taco up towards the top and the snake up towards the top. Eventually they'll be repositioned by the program anyway. I'm also going to move the dog up a little bit so it's kind of, it still looks like it's on the ground, but it's just, there's a little bit of distance from the bottom. Alright, so that should be all the image sprites. The app is also going to need 2 more labels, one for score and one for lives. That will be, I want them to be arranged horizontally, so I'm going to get a horizontal arrangement, layout, horizontal arrangement, and I'll put both of the labels inside there, as well as a button, just so you have a way to reset the game. So for the first label, I'm going to call that label score. The second label, label lives, and I'll change the text for that one to be score colon space 0, first label score, and for label lives, lives colon space 3. Again, this is information that will be updated by the program eventually, but I'm just giving starting values. And for the button, I'll call it button reset. I'll make its text say reset. All the text is kind of small, so I'm just going to go through all of my objects that I just added, all of my components, and change the font size to 18. Just make it a little bit larger. Just to make it a little bit easier to read. And if you want to, you can change the colors and fonts and bold. You can bold the text and make other changes if you want to. I'm going to leave this just sort of as is, but you can change background colors and text properties if you want to. I'm going to move on to the blocks though, so let's get some functionality in this app. First thing, I just want to make it so that the dog can move. That's going to be moved by the user dragging their finger across from side to side, and the only thing it needs to update is the X position of the dog. It just needs to go side to side, it doesn't need to go up and down. So I'm just going to say when, this is the whole canvas, when you drag your finger across the canvas anywhere, I'll set the dog, image sprite dog, set image sprite dog X to the current X of that swipe. So anytime you drag your finger across the screen, the dog will just follow it. Let me see if I can refresh this. It might have disconnected, so I'll probably need to relaunch. Alright, so as you can see, I can drag anywhere on the screen. I can drag at the bottom, I can drag at the top. As long as in the emulator I'm clicking and dragging, but on a phone or a tablet, it would just be a swipe. Anywhere, wherever my mouse goes, the dog goes. So that works. Let's move on to the next feature. The next thing I suppose I should add is all the rest of the motions. So everything else has to move on its own. Snake and the taco have to move on their own. That's going to happen with the help of a clock. The clock is just going to be a clock that ticks, and every time the clock ticks, it that's an event that'll trigger movement. So I'll go to sensors and find a clock. And the clock is always going to fire. It's always going to tick. And it will be enabled. That's good. The interval, this is listed in milliseconds. So there's 1,000 milliseconds in a second, and 1,000 milliseconds is way too long. I want this clock to be ticking really fast so I can do frequent updates to control animation. I'm going to make this 10. We'll update every 10 milliseconds. So it'll really, this timer will just be constantly going off. And every time that happens, it'll just do some update. So now, what I want to happen when the clock ticks is I want to move the snake and I want to move the taco. I don't want to put all the motion code directly in here because I kind of want those things to just be wrapped up in their own procedures. So I'm going to create some procedures. Procedure for moving snake. The procedure for moving the taco. The reason I'm doing this is I just want what happens when the timer ticks to be really readable. Like every time the timer ticks, this is kind of my main code here. The timer is kind of controlling most of the action in this app. So I want this main event, the timer event, to be very readable, and I want it to just be obvious what happens when the timer ticks. So having all this code that I'm about to write grouped into procedures, and then I just do something like this, call move snake, call move taco, I can write all my code for movement in here and in here, but it's really clear when you read it that when the timer ticks, the snake moves and the taco moves. So all the complication behind moving the snake and moving the taco can be kind of hidden away. So that's an example of something called abstraction. Just taking the details of how something works and hiding it, so you don't have to think about it when you're looking at sort of a more general view of something like this, for example. So what's going to happen when you move, when I move the snake, for example? I'm going to do, I want to set the image sprite snake Y position. So I'm going to set image sprite snake, and I'm going to set its Y to itself plus some number. So I need a math block, I need image sprite snake get block for the Y, and then some number is going to go here. I'm going to start with 5. And then what will happen is the snake is going to fall because I'm using a positive Y value. Remember, in App Inventor, positive Y values are actually down. Let's see. The way the App Inventor coordinate system works, as X increases from left to right, and Y increases from top to bottom. So I'm increasing by 5. That means the snake is actually going to fall down. The next thing I need to add is what happens if it reaches the bottom. So if the snake hits the bottom of the screen, I don't want it to just sit there. I want it to go just sort of jump back to the top so it can fall again. So I need an if statement for that. That's in a built-in control block. If an if block is just going to check to see if some condition is true. If that thing is true, then it'll run some code. So there's an if and a then. If something is true, in this case, if the snake is on the bottom of the screen, then I want it to go back to the top. So I need to get I need to test if its y value has reached some point, which is actually going to be the bottom. So I need one of these with evaluations in it. I'm going to change this from equals to greater than if the snake's y position is greater than, and right now our canvas's height and width are both 300. So the height of the entire screen is 300. However, there's also the height of the snake to consider. Right? So the snake is never really going to actually reach 300 because it's going to hit the bottom before that. This is because the image sprite's sort of top left corner is its 0 point, so it'll never actually reach the bottom. So I mean, you can see, I'll show you an example. Let me just say, let me put 300 right here, and you know it's never actually going to fall this far, but let's just test it out just so you can see. What I want it to do is I want its y to then be reset to 0 back at the top. You might think this would work. So you can see the snake starts off by falling and then it hits the bottom. It doesn't move at all. It just sits there. Snake is just sitting at the bottom. So what I need to do is account for the fact that once it stops moving once it reaches the bottom, and it never actually gets past its y value never actually gets past 300. So it's actually its own height is 30. So does it go to 270? It still isn't moving because it actually needs to be one less than that point. So now we switch. Yep. So 269 is the point where the snake actually reaches because it doesn't bottom out anymore. So okay, now we got the snake resetting. It's resetting back to the same x value every time though. It's just kind of going to the same spot. And that's kind of boring because if it's the game's kind of too predictable, it's to just avoid that spot and you'll never get hit by the snake. So the next thing I'll need to add is I'll need to mix up what the x value is. I'll just duplicate this and I'll say set the snake x to a random integer. And it can be anywhere from 1 to the width of the screen. But remember, we have to also subtract the width of the snake. So up to 269, just like the height is limited by the width of the snake, -1. So that should now reset the snake. Oh, it's kind of resetting all the time. Oh, this needs to be inside the if block. Okay, there we go. So now if the snake y value is greater than positive 269, that means it's on the bottom. So it's going to reset back to the top, which is the image sprite snake.y is being set to 0 at the top of the screen. And then its x will be set to a random number, so it kind of goes randomly elsewhere on the screen. Now the move taco procedure is just the same thing. So it's just going to be for the taco. So I'm just going to duplicate a bunch of these blocks. And instead of snake, I'll change all of this to taco. And you don't even have to worry about the size, like adjusting for the size, because they're the same size. And they really just need to do the same thing. So that should work just fine. And you can see they both fall and reset. All right, so you've got movement for the dog, you've got movement for the snake and the taco. Another thing we'll need to add is scoring. So how are you actually going to score? The way that's going to happen is you're going to need to sort of test if one thing collides with another. Like you're going to have to do it, like have code test to see if the dog is colliding with some other sprite, either a taco or a snake. So I'm going to make another new procedure for that because this is also going to be like a somewhat complex group of code that would start complicating this main event handler right here. Instead of shoving all this stuff, this plus all the collision checking inside this one event handler, I'll make a procedure to abstract this away. So I'll make another new procedure. This one will be called check collisions. And that's also going to happen every time the timer fires. And when I check collisions, what I want to do is more if statements. Basically check if the dog collided with the taco or if the dog collided with the snake. So if image sprite dog is colliding with some other thing, calling this procedure right now, I should probably take that out. I think it's crashing my program. I'm going to keep getting errors, so I just separated this out for now, so it's not actually running. So if the dog is colliding with something else, and in this case, let's make this something else the taco. So I'm going to go find the taco, image taco, and scroll all the way to the bottom of its options, and there's just this block that represents the entire taco. It's just its name. So the other thing is this thing. So if the dog is colliding with this other thing, the taco, I want to increase the score. Well, right now we don't actually have a way to track the score. We have a label that says the score, but we need to track just the number. The label has a bunch of text mixed together with it, so we can't just sort of count up with. We can't count up with that, right? The label that says score currently holds text score 0. I can't just count up the 0 by itself. I need to keep track of just as the number by itself. So I need a variable for that. So in orange block, variables, I need to initialize a new variable, in this case, score. And while I'm setting up variables, I might as well set one up for lives as well, because I know I'm going to need to do that next. So score, I want to start at 0. I'm just going to, if you want to pull up a number, just type the number while you have the block active. Like I click on the score block and I'm working on the score block. If I just type 0 and enter, it should, of course it doesn't, didn't work this time. Or maybe if I type 0 and click 0. All right, well, I'm just going to duplicate this then. Sometimes you can get numbers to come up by typing them and hitting enter. Didn't work for me that time though. So I want the score to start at 0. I want lives to start at 3. So all right, now that I have these variables here, what these are storage containers for data. Your score is a container that holds the score. Lives is a container that holds the number of lives remaining. And this data is numbers, so I can actually do math with it. I can add or subtract, as opposed to the label, which has the number combined with text. So I need to be able to change the number and then combine it back together with the text. So I'm going to, when I score, increase the number of points. So I'm going to hover over this score, or you can also get variables from here, just a general set, for example, or you can get a specific one here by hovering over it. I'm going to set score to what score used to be. So I'm going to use a get to get what the score used to be, plus 1. So score will be set to score plus 1. So score will go up by 1. And this is a case where, when this happens, there's some things I also know I want to happen. I want the taco to move back to the top. Like I don't want the taco to be just passing through the dog the whole time. I kind of want it to reset so that it goes somewhere else. So I'm just going to change that now. That's going to be the same way it resets up here. I could make this its own procedure, like, I don't know, reposition taco or something. It's just one duplicate. I'm just going to duplicate the code. It's not, I don't know if it's complex enough to need its own procedure, so I'm just going to duplicate this. So when the dog collides with the taco, the score is going to go up. The taco will go back to the top of the screen and reposition along the x-axis as well. Then a similar thing is going to happen if it collides with the dog, except this will be live. So I'm going to change. I need to change this as well. Not the dog. Hold on. This similar thing will happen if the dog collides with the snake. So this is what controls lives. If the dog collides with the snake, I'm going to set lives to lives -1. So I have a plus block here. I'm just going to say plus -1. That works too. And I'll set the snake image sprite to 0, and the snake image sprite to a random x value. All right, so let's take a look at how this works. And I think I may need to refresh, or I might not call this right. I'm not calling the procedure because I disconnected this because it was causing errors. Let me call the procedure and see how it works. Okay, so it's resetting the snake. Is it counting anything? It is resetting the positions, but it's not actually showing anything. Why isn't it showing anything? Well, I updated the variable, but the variable only controls the data. It doesn't control the display. Remember, what you see is label score and label lives. I didn't change label score and label lives here. I changed the variable score. This says global score. These are global variables. That means anything in the program can use them. I'm not going to get into the details of what that means, global versus local, but just know that a global variable is something that can be used anywhere in the program. So this global score is what changed. I still need to update the actual screen. So that is going to be another procedure that I make. I'm going to write another procedure called update display. And what I want to happen when I update the display is I just want to set those labels to display the correct information. So I'm going to click on label score, set label score.text, and I'm going to set it to join together just some text that says score : space, and then the score variable. So whatever number is stored in the score variable. So I'll get score. And then I can do the same thing. I just duplicate that and change label score to label lives, change score to lives here, change score to lives here, and now I have something that should be able to update the display. So now that I have my procedure written, I can call the update display procedure, and this time it should hopefully be counting up when I eat tacos and counting down when I lose lives. Now, the game's been running for a while. Even though it wasn't updating the display, it was updating the data. And notice my scores got pretty high. My lives are already well below 0 because the game's never reset. So Another feature I'll need to add is what happens when you run out of lives. I'm not going to have a super complex sort of end game state. It's just going to be when your lives run out, the game stops. So I'm just going to put that in my, I'll put that in my check collisions because that's kind of when it happens, right? You lose a life when there's a collision. So I'll just add another if statement. If, I'll need an equal sign because if the lives variable equals 0, and I want to set, I want to stop everything from moving. And that's where I run into another problem. I don't have a way to control the speed of everything falling because it's kind of hard coded right here. When the taco moves and the snake moves, it's just the number 5 right now. That's how much it moves by. This 5 and this 5. I'm going to replace that with a variable. So I need another new variable. Initialize a new variable called speed. I want to start at 5. However, see in a minute, it won't stay that way. So what I'll do is right here, where it said 5, I'm going to make that speed. So it'll still be 5 at the beginning when the app starts. But I now have the ability to change a variable that'll change the speed of everything. Okay, so now I have a variable for speed that's controlling how fast the snake is moving and how fast the taco is moving because it controls how much it moves every time it moves. So if I want to stop everything from moving, the easiest way to do that is going to be to set speed to 0, and that'll stop everything. Now, the game will never actually, the score will never actually reach 0 because it's already gone well past it. I can just refresh the companion screen for now just to test out this feature. All right, so you can see that the game is running. If I get tacos, I get points. Let me run into some snakes a few times just to make sure my speed variable stops. Sets the speed to 0 and stops everything from moving, and it does. Everything stops moving. So there's my end game state. Now the game is still kind of a little bit boring because the speed never changes and it starts off kind of slow. Well, I have the speed variable now, so I can use that to also adjust the speed as you play. So I can just get a set block and set speed to speed plus 1, just like I do with score. Set speed to speed plus 1, and I'll do that every time the dog collides with the taco. So every time you get a point, you also gain speed a little bit. And my game is kind of stuck because it ended, so it'll be really helpful to have a way to restart the game. So that's what my reset button is for. So when the reset button is clicked, I want to sort of set up anything that I need for the beginning of the game. So beginning of the game is going to include the image sprite locations. I want to make sure they're in this sort of in their starting spots. So I'll say set the taco X and taco Y to 0. Or no, sorry. Set the taco Y to 0. I want to set the taco X to random. It's actually just this code over here. And then do the same thing for the snake. So the snake Y to 0, the snake X to random. And I should set all my variables to what I want their starting state to be. So I want the speed to start It seemed like 5 was an okay number for that. I want my score to start at 0 because at the beginning you shouldn't have any points yet. And lives, I'll start with 3 lives. I mean, that can vary, but 3 seems fine. So now the reset button should work. So if I click that reset button, the game should reset. If I have the dog eat some tacos, it gets points. I'm avoiding snakes, and it should be speeding up over time. So the game should get faster and therefore a little bit more difficult over time. And eventually it'll get kind of hard to avoid the snakes because you just won't have enough time to get out of the way. Or you just make a mistake and you get hit by a snake and it's game over. And so that's it. You have a working snack game.